What's up, everyone? It's Peter Tragos, the lawyer you know, and today we're going to discuss the federal plea deal that Greg and Travis McMichael attempted to make in federal court. So, as we all know, they are the convicted murderers of Ahmaud-Arbery in state court, but there are additional federal hate crimes charged against them for which they were going to trial for very shortly. But before trial, they worked out a deal with the prosecutor that they brought before the judge. And today we're going to talk about what that deal is, why the judge rejected it, and what is likely to happen after all is said and done with their prison time. So if you guys are interested in this case, make sure you hit the like button and we'll continue to follow the federal proceedings, talk about what happens in this case at the very end. So if you haven't already subscribed to our channel, make sure you click over to our main page, hit subscribe, and follow along with all the videos that we publish so that you can get in the comments and we can discuss your thoughts and feelings on the criminal justice system, the civil justice system, whether it's state or federal, and I can answer any questions you may have. So as part of this video, we're going to explain from a lawyer's point of view why certain plea deals are made like this and what factors come into a judge's mind if they are going to reject a plea deal that both lawyers and the clients agree to, as happened in this case. So when we talk about plea deals, the first place to start is obviously what did they agree to? So Travis and Gregory McMichael agreed, and actually we don't know about Greg because he didn't actually enter into the plea deal because he paused and his lawyers paused after the judge rejected the plea deal between Travis McMichael and the government. So McMichael agreed to plead guilty to a single hate crime charge, which is interference with rights, in exchange for prosecutors recommending he serve 30 years in federal prison. And that's the important part. The 30 years in federal prison. And the judge rejected it. So the first question is, why would Travis McMichael want to plead guilty to a federal hate crime? Because we talked about it after the state case. He's going to appeal the state case. He may have some legitimate appellate issues in that case. So if he pleads to the federal case, he's looking at least 30 years, and he may make some admissions, which we'll talk about later, that could affect his state appeal. So why would he want to do this? Well, if he pleads to these federal charges, he will serve the first 30 years of his life sentence in state court in federal prison. Now, there's going to be a lot of talk about, wow, they don't deserve federal prison. Federal prison's way too nice for them. People acting like federal prison is the Ritz-Carlton compared to Motel 6. But in reality, prison is prison, and you don't want to go to prison, period. But if you are going to compare federal to state prison, federal prison has more funding, less people, and just an overall better environment and less harsh environment. So Travis McMichael is looking at this saying, maybe he's realizing at this point that he's cooked. Maybe he's finally coming to grips with what he did was wrong. Maybe he's ready to admit that. And he is choosing to serve the first 30 years in federal prison. And once that is done, then he will serve the remainder of his life sentence in state prison. So he still ends up in state prison should he live the 30 years that he's serving in federal prison. So that's why Travis McMichael is looking at this plea deal most likely, and his lawyers are advising, I think we should do this. Now, let's go over to what the state is thinking. The state is thinking we get a conviction. We get a conviction of a hate crime, and we get admissions from Travis McMichael. And as part of this plea deal, some of the very important admissions that Travis McMichael was going to have to make would be, so in agreeing to the plea deal, Travis McMichael conceded that he killed ahmaud-arbery as he ran down a public street, and he acted because of Mr. Arbery's race or color. That, to me, is incredibly important. And if I'm a federal prosecutor, I take this any day of the week because I get an admission, I get a confession, basically. I get a conviction, I get 30 years in prison. He's convicted of a hate crime, and maybe some closure for the Arbery family. So I understand where the prosecutors are coming from in negotiating this plea deal. And that's what I'd be thinking if I was that prosecutor. But the judge rejected it. Why did the judge reject this plea deal? And how? A judge does not have to accept a plea deal between the state and the defense, which is the scary part for the defense. And once Travis McMichael's plea deal, the judge indicated she may reject it, Greg McMichael pulled back, Travis McMichael pulled back, and they said, hold on, let us talk to our lawyers. And I think they continued these discussions until next Friday. So they haven't made the decision to enter this plea deal because the judge has basically said, I am not agreeing to tying my hands to sentencing Travis McMichael and Greg McMichael to 30 years in federal prison, which they would serve prior to their state prison sentence. I am not agreeing to tie my hands. So once they learn that indication of the judge, and that's what happens a lot of times in these plea deals, the judge will give you an indication as to where they're leaning. Sometimes, which is very scary for defendants, you can plead open to the court, which just means I'm pleading guilty, judge, please have mercy on me because these prosecutors are horrible and they want to hammer me they want to throw the book at me. So judge, please have mercy. That's happened in some cases when I was a prosecutor. I watched some of those cases where the judge took it way easier on the criminal defendant than any deal the state was offering. But the criminal defendant wanted to admit that he was guilty. He did the crime. He wanted to do the time, but he didn't want to do the max. And it worked out pleading open with the court. I've seen other situations where it works out horribly for them. So it really just depends on the judge. And in this case, the judge said, I'm not agreeing to tie my hands. So Mr. Defendant, if you want to plead guilty to this, go ahead. But just know, I'm not agreeing to what the prosecutor said, and the prosecutor doesn't sentence you, I do. So this sentence could be very different than what you think you've agreed to with the prosecutor. Let me know in the comments whether or not you think that is appropriate or whether or not you think the judge should just have to sign off on whatever the lawyers and the parties agree to. And the parties in this case are the criminal defendant and the United States government. The people of the United States of America. Okay, so why did the judge reject this plea deal? Well, first, Ahmaud-Arbery's parents have come out and they are very angry about this. They are disappointed that the government would ever offer a deal like this. They can't believe they're going so easy on them, letting them serve their time in federal prison. The mother of Ahmaud-Arbery even said, I fought so hard to get them in state prison. Why do you think they want them in state prison so bad? I think a lot of people have guessed what will happen to the McMichaels in Gen Pop at a state prison. I think they could be put in solitary confinement for their own safety, which again makes the environment miserable for them, at least safe, but miserable for the McMichaels when compared to federal prison potentially. So that's another thing to consider here when we're weighing how big of a win this may be for the McMichaels to serve the first 30 years in federal prison. And obviously Gregory, the father, would likely die in federal prison if he served 30 years there. So the parents came out heavily against this. They're disgusted with the United States government for even offering this plea deal. But the government responded that the attorneys for the family, which I think is Ben Crump, agreed to this plea deal before they ever offered it. And the attorneys have responded saying, absolutely not. We agreed to a plea deal. We did not agree to them serving their time first in federal prison. So the victim's family has a voice here. But the judge said, I understand what the victim's family is saying. However, I will take their comments and their feelings into consideration at sentencing, not at the plea deal, and not whether or not to accept a plea deal, which is correct. The victim's family is not the shot caller when it comes to a plea deal. Now, their voice can be heard and it can be considered, and they can be very persuasive in the sentencing, but not in whether or not to accept a plea deal. So the judge says that's not the reason she's doing it. She says she doesn't want to have her hands tied, and she doesn't necessarily agree with these sentencing guidelines that are being given to her on this plea deal. Do you believe that? Or do you think this judge is considering what the victims are saying and is considering the public pressure of this case? Because it doesn't make a lot of sense to me that you already have the state convictions, you already have the life sentences, you're going to tack on 30 more years, you're going to tack on the hate crimes, you're going to tack on a confession, yet the judge is saying, no, I'm basically going to force this case to go to trial, or I'm going to be able to throw the book at you defendants. Doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but if you're going to comment below that you think it's public pressure on the judge, so I'm going to ask you, why do you think the judge rejected this plea deal? If you're going to comment public pressure, I want you to remember, this is a federal judge, a sitting federal judge, and she is appointed for life. Nobody can vote her out. People can disagree with her. She can have all the public pressure anybody wants to put on her, and it does not affect her job. So she is making the decision she thinks is right. It's something to consider. I don't know. I feel like I would have taken it if I was a judge because of the confession and the admission, and because I think that puts to rest his state appeals. So if he were to win that state appeal, they would be able to use in a new trial his federal plea where he admitted to killing Ahmaud-Arbery for the color of his skin. He wouldn't be able to have a new trial. He'd have to plead to something in state court, or he gets convicted every time. So I think that's worth it enough to take this plea deal. Now listen, they're probably going to go and lose the federal trial anyways. I get that. But there is the 0.1% chance they win. There's the 1% chance they win a state appeal. Why open yourself up to that just to make sure they're in state prison versus federal prison? Again, it's not the Ritz-Carlton. Federal prison still sucks. So lastly, I want to talk about the fact that Ahmaud-Arbery's mom is basically saying the McMichaels should not get to choose the conditions of their confinement. They shouldn't choose where they're going to spend the rest of their life for the next 30 years. The McMichaels did not choose to be charged with federal hate crimes. It could have been the fact that they just got convicted of murder. They're going to serve the rest of their life in state prison. It could have ended there. But these hate crimes had a lot of public pressure behind them. Ahmaud-Arbery's family was behind them. I understand why, and especially now they're pleading guilty. It was obviously true. But the McMichaels didn't ask for this. The McMichaels didn't push to also tack on federal charges. So once those federal charges are there, now they've got to make a decision. So again, them choosing the conditions of their confinement to me is not what this is. They didn't choose to say, oh, you know what would be a good idea is if we also got charged with federal crimes because then we can go to federal prison. These charges could be dropped. Then they'd have to go to state prison. So what happens if they go to trial and lose and they get a federal sentence? Will they end up in federal prison or state prison? Well, usually they go to wherever they were in prison first. And because they were convicted of murder in state court, they were in state prison, transferred up for this federal trial, they would serve the state time first, most likely, which is a life sentence. So they would never get to federal court. And to make sure they served their time in state court, the judge could, in federal court, sentence them to a concurrent sentence, meaning while they're in state prison, they would be also serving their federal time. So those 30 years of federal prison would be served day for day in state prison. So they never get to federal prison. To make sure the punishment is as severe as the victim's family wants, which they seem to feel like state prison is the way to go and the most severe punishment. So that's what another potential outcome that could happen if they were to go to trial and lose, or even if they were to plea. And the judge said, you know what, I'll give you 30 years, but I'm going to serve it. I'm going to sentence you concurrent with your state sentence. Therefore, go back to state prison. That's where you're going to serve it. So there are some nuances here to what can happen and why lawyers think certain ways, how victims get involved, and how judges think that are really important to these circumstances. So hopefully you learned something in today's video. If you have any questions or comments, leave them below. Thanks for being with us. If you like the video, hit the like button now. Thanks a lot. Thanks for watching this episode of The Lawyer You Know. If you like this content, please share it with your friends. Make sure you subscribe to our page and like our videos. If you want some interaction, get in the comments and we'll be sure to get back to you. If you want to know any more information about our firm or this page, you can find out in the description or visit tragoslaw.com. We post multiple times throughout the week, so make sure you hit that bell so you can get the notification and not miss out on the next episode.